Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI and Big Data, sponsored by WILDA, Women Leaders in Data and Artificial Intelligence. Our guest today is Sneha Kumari. She's coming to us all the way from Los Angeles. And what's interesting is not only is Sneha a senior supply chain manager, but she's also the head of industry trends at the Circular Supply Chain Network for over 2 years now. Welcome, Sneha.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. Absolutely an honor. I have followed you for a couple years now, and I am a big fan, especially, the topic of this podcast with a series of AI and what your contributions have been in this field. So truly, truly blessed to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Let's swap positions here.
I wish I could. I want to start my podcast of my own and then have you as guest and like
Fabulous.
so much more.
I want to start with your professional journey. What's interesting here is you started out with a background with technology, electronics, instruments. You even followed that career path within the industries that you worked with. But what was of note is 6, 7 years later, you went back to school and specifically got your MBA within supply chain. So I'd like to understand your professional journey and what happened that shifted your focus.
Yeah, gosh, like it feels like I'm so old when talking about it. But yeah, I mean, I graduated. I did my bachelor's in technology from
Mhm.
India in electronics and instrumentation. And after graduation, I started my career with Honeywell, wherein I actually was doing some of the work that I was taught in colleges. So, the whole process, loop, input, output, feedback loops, and things like that. And I say this because I wish there were, once I started my professional journey, I wish there was so much more that's taught in colleges that you could actually use in industries. But I'm glad that some of it that I did study, I could apply it. And then I was doing a lot of quality assurance when I started, and then took the same route when I moved on to Schneider too. But just doing all of this, I was involved in R&D. So like, new product innovation
Mhm.
and launching. And when I was doing that, I was kind of slightly experience the aspect of supply chain, which is procurement, like talking to the vendors, bringing them in and understanding what kind of products they have. So, well, not products, items they have that we could use to build our own, R&D research project, stuff like that. So that's where the love started, I would say. And it was fun, like, just building relationships, talking to them, bringing them in. MBA, I always knew that I had to get like I will go back to school someday and
Hmm.
do like masters and understand the overall like business as a whole. I just knew that I wanted few years of experience before I could do that. And you can call it like, it's funny when I say this, but my mom has like done double masters
Mhm.
in her time. So I think it's kind of comes from her, like, come on, like your mom has done masters twice. Like that, the least I could do is just do masters once. So maybe that's what, like, it was in my head. Like I always knew I had to do my MBA. I just didn't know what and why. But
Mhm.
that whole professional journey helped me shape my kind of focus. Like, okay, I want to go there. And do my MBA. And thanks to my husband, who actually did his MBA from Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
So I got into the school, knew a lot to navigate, especially in United States. That was like literally my first time coming to United States. I've lived in Europe for some time. So but like mostly as a professional.
Mhm.
And so when I came here, my husband really helped me also, just to the day to day, and what to expect, what not. So that was a huge help. But just the whole 2 years of MBA was a journey of my own, and something that I'll definitely cherish for life, because there were so many experiences that exposed me to industries and how people work and how things work here was important. And the professors and the supply chain lessons that I learned in those 2 years. um and I started my career at Crane, which is a manufacturing company.
Mhm.
And that started like, it's it's funny that I started my career with procurement. So I started in procurement,
Mhm.
managing commodities and your in annual strategies and what should be annual strategies and stuff like that. And then I moved my career most then, to the tactical side, like demand planning, and started leading teams. So how's managing inventory work? What about logistics, reverse logistics? So I saw the tactical side of it. And then I also led the whole manufacturing, like full like production side,
Mhm.
wherein now that was a left piece. Like I'm doing everything about materials, bringing in, sending them out. But what do you do about capacity planning and how's the production floor run and stuff like that. So I really thank them for giving me that full, round experience and different
Mhm.
roles. So that gives me an idea of how literally materials come in and what should be a strategy there and then make it, then ship it, and then if it comes back, then you have RMAs and whatnot. But the good part was when I was doing this, what's funny is when I was managing inventory, we were talking about, okay, how do you reduce inventory and blah blah blah. And then as soon as I switched roles and operations, I could see why operation managers are always like, okay, what about my on-time delivery? I need more inventory. And so now the roles flip and you understand the other side of it, right? And
Right.
this is where I knew that you need shared metrics. Like enough, like you can like that's why your finance team and inventory team are sometimes at loggerheads with your ops team, because you probably are chasing different goals, which is
Mhm.
not right, because ultimately it's about your customer while keeping your business profitable. So these are some of the perspectives I share, because I learned this because I led different roles and
Mhm.
understand end to end this whole umbrella of strategic and tactical supply chain. And then I'm recently with Amazon and doing a lot more in supply chains and learning a lot more
Mhm.
from a tech side of it also, like how do you implement tech and then improve your supply chain. So it's been great. And circular supply chain network is this started like 2 years back. Deborah Dahl, she is pioneering this whole space,
Mhm.
pretty big, and she has been talking about circularity a lot. And then I joined her in this journey. She founded the network, and all we do is talk about supply chains and how circularity can be achieved because of the power of supply chains. It's unique, and if you really go online, there are very few, like there is so much less knowledge or articles out there talking about circular supply chains. You talk about circular economy and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Very few talking about literally circular supply chains. And so that's why this whole mission and this whole community where we are bringing leaders across the world, where they talk about what they are doing. So it's not something new. People are doing work in this field, but just you need more exposure and have we did some cool things where we have created some videos, some short courses where students can really go in and in a very very layman language you can actually understand what a circular supply chain is and how you can contribute
So
towards.
I think that's a good point. So before we move too much further for the audience, what is a circular supply chain?
I'm literally gonna read it for you for what we say, but
Mhm.
go feel free to follow us on LinkedIn too. But circular supply chains are interconnected systems that primarily talks about focusing on secondary inputs, not virgin inputs, secondary and renewable inputs,
Mhm.
to generate value by reducing resource use. What does that mean? Meaning, try to maximize the life of your product to the extent possible, and if possible, use secondary inputs. So, meaning, how about trying to find other supply chains that you can bring in and use as materials to build your products,
Mhm.
right? Or is there any way that you're looking at your waste at the end of the in your whole supply chain that you can bring back and use as inputs? So pretty much, how lean talks about monetizing waste. If
Mhm.
most of our supply chain individual talk about lean, circularity talks about uh, reducing waste, like pretty much reduce it, but then also make sure that it's you use somehow the waste is reduced, the product life cycle is improved to the extent possible, and you're using secondary inputs to reduce the pull on the planet. That is, in a nutshell, what circular supply chain is.
So everything that you've just mentioned, putting my, hat on, my podcast host hat on, there's a lot of data. in what you just talked about, and the amount of data that we're creating is exponential of, zettabytes. I think it's at some point it was like 190 zettabytes, per day that we as the world, each of us, in total create new data. And the data that you're talking about, not only from a primary source, but also from a secondary source, and then adding in additional supply chains on top of that, that's a vast amount of data to try to wrap your arms around and try to understand.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel that it's all a game of, looking at all of the data that you have and become as powerful as you can get, right? So, like I've spoken about, smart circular economies. Like, how will that look for,
Mhm.
and if you think about it, I'm talking about narrow, specialized systems. You can call it artificial intelligence systems. They are good at performing like specific, well-defined tasks, such as image and voice recognition and or trend prediction. And what we can do is, like for example, as I said, secondary materials. How do you find your secondary markets? How do you know that, hey, this industry, my peer industry, say if I'm a textile manufacturer, right, and I could use some food waste
Mhm.
as an input to my products. How do you know where is that marketplace where I can go find out more about it, right? And then also recognizing the quality of, what the state is, what that raw materials state is that usable? Like, all of this data is so important, right?
Mhm.
You can build algorithms that can look at all these large data set of materials and customer, preferences at the same time. Also, like, we talk a lot about designing for circularity also. Like, for example, like, instead of just thinking about bringing waste back in your system and how to use secondary inputs, also think about how you build your product when you're thinking about a new product that is fit, like easily remanufacturable, or easily be able to, break it down and bring it back. The materials that you use in your product, you could bring it back to your supply chains. So those are the things that we are thinking about. And you just nailed it when you said, like, it's all about data. Like, think about
Mhm.
predictive maintenance. Like, products are at the end of the life, um, um, and they're harder to be just, automatically disassembled, sorted, or to sort and separate. And if I am able to do predictive analysis for maintenance, again, I need data to understand, where are the faults, what are the products that are still usable and actually extend the useful life, and make the whole process of disassembly of products easier based on whatever condition it is. So whatever I just said, it needs data at every step of it, at every phase of it, to make it more powerful and easier for companies to run their business while also be able to add value to our ecosystem. But there is a but here that
Mhm.
I always want to, talk about, which is, um, and was reading, I mean, I'm sure you are aware also, like, for example, training a neural network. I don't even probably know what a neural network is, but
Mhm.
training a neural architecture probably results in 600,000 of carbons, like pounds of carbon
Mhm.
emissions, which is probably equivalent to the carbon emissions of 5 cars over a lifetime of the car. So some of these numbers are really overwhelming to digest, right? And what's even, like, what I feel also is there aren't a lot of studies that, okay, so I'm talking about AI and the power of AI and what it can do, and all the data learning related products that we are using. We're talking about all of that, but we're not talking about what it takes, the energy it takes to actually set this up, right? And be able to successfully run those algorithms. And like, is there like have if we have a machine learning emissions calculator, like,
Mhm.
let also display how much emissions we had, just because we were training this AI model to support our new product development. So what I'm saying is, this cannot be counterintuitive. Like while I'm saying circular supply chains need
Yeah.
data studies and all of that, and AI can prove so powerful in making this whole thing happen. But ultimately, my goal is to add value to the ecosystem around us. But then, if training, not every data center that is powering an AI model is using reusable energy. We all know
So
that. Not
I did look up the article that you just mentioned. That's the value of doing a podcast while I'm sitting at my computer. April 7th, 2022, a research paper, Energy and Policy Considerations for Deep Learning and NLP, Natural Language Processing, states that an inefficiently trained natural language processing model using neural architecture, which is what you just mentioned, can emit more than 626,000 pounds of carbon, which is 5 times the lifetime emissions of an average American vehicle.
Yep, that's
I don't
exactly.
I don't think we really, I mean, I've I talk a lot about the impact of AI to procurement, the supply chain, how it's impacting us daily in our personal lives, how I'm able to, my Tesla. I have a Tesla this year. That's got AI technologies, how it's, professionally, how we're able to use, technologies in project management. We're able to use it in other activities in farming. But I don't think that I've combined what you just talked about, connecting the dots between a circular economy and recognizing that we also need to look at that and apply it to what we've been talking about, which is artificial intelligence and the technologies behind it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what I feel like. We talk about the power of it, and
Mm,
I'm nowhere not, I'm totally for it. But what we are not talking about is what it takes to make that happen. And then, like as I said, like energy is not always derived from, carbon neutral sources.
mhm,
Um, and if there is, how many companies are really doing it? Maybe the leading companies are, but what about every other source? And again, we also circular supply chains, we always say that cloud is a real place. Like think about it, it is a real space. There's a whole uh gamut of processes and data centers and sensors out there, hardware supporting your cloud space, so use it wisely. Your
mhm,
as something as simple as your inbox, your Microsoft Outlook is real space. Let we need to talk about it more. And that's why I am talking more from a circular supply chain context,
mhm,
because I'm saying that I want to look at regenerative systems, and I want to make sure that we are reducing the pull on the planet. While AI can be super powerful and we are training all these models, let's also, like, it's time that we use real calculations and
mhm.
explicitly state how much energy is being spent in refining, setting up an AI training model. Um, that's
Hmm.
my perspective. That's where I come from. As and maybe if maybe I and again, and someone not having never, like, I'm not a developer building AI models or whatever.
Mhm.
Maybe it's time that we invest some more time in seeing how we can reduce that pull before we take that additional step and start using AI uh, in every single process of supply chain that we are. So as you said, in procurement to logistics to
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
all of,
I apologize. Go ahead.
I mean, it's pretty much like, okay, stop, think how, what can be done to reduce this pull on the
Mhm.
before starting, or maybe do it in parallel while propagating how powerful AI is for all of us.
So I interviewed somebody a year ago. She used to work with IBM. She's no longer there now, but her primary function was in research. And she was trying to understand how to reduce the carbon footprint of the smokestacks from manufacturing plants. A long time ago, they created this cap, and this cap fits on top of those stacks, and it does absorb some of the carbons and the toxic chemicals that are being produced. But in reality, it was such a small percent of a percent. So one of the things she was doing was she was trying to understand how could she combine multiple materials. There is a point to the story, how she could combine multiple materials and be able to improve the caps that are on those stacks.
Mhm.
And the reason why I talked to her is she uses AI technology to constantly run through the scenarios, which if she hadn't had that technology, just being able to run through a series of material combinations only to realize that those combinations weren't going to work. If we didn't have the technology, it would take her years to only discover that that wasn't the right path. And then she would then come up with a new inference and a conclusion, hypothesis. And then she would spend another year or two, doing that. But with the use of the technology and being able to get through that data much more quickly, she was able to come to those decisions more quickly. So the point of the story here is that we're using AI technologies to help mitigate the consequences of some of our climate problems and some of the toxic chemicals that comes out of these smokestacks. But now what I think I'm hearing from you is we're also recognizing that AI is a big carbon emitter. And I don't think that's really been advertised as much as what you're talking about today.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I feel like we talk, and I'm saying like it's AI is super powerful in whatever we are doing, especially in supply chains, and as you said, like adding value to the planet
Mm-hmm.
and building a circular economy. But how about how are we making sure that AI isn't or creating additional pull on the planet while
Mm-hmm.
we are all talking about the good things that it does?
So do
Um,
you have some ideas? Do you have a
um,
perspective on?
I do have like so I don't have an idea of
Mhm,
how AI can reduce the pull on the planet,
mhm,
right? Like we have the experts actually doing research on that. I do remember there was an MIT article like actually a year back or sometime where they said that there is studies and research going on how they could reduce the emissions in running those algorithms. Um, to reduce the impact. But what I would say is firstly, like when we are measuring our like today, for example, let's look
mhm,
at logistics. There's a huge I was in a conference lately and like literally like 3 months ago, and one of the questions that every logistics provider was answering is how they can measure carbon footprint for industries. Clearly gives me an idea that every industry today, because also, the because of also like being part of the Paris Agreement, some of the bigger also tech industries are more interested on what our um, carbon footprint is. Everyone is now focused on how do we get that data. Great. How about also making sure that whatever inputs or processes we have today, we
mhm,
are able to capture or gather the carbon footprint data of those two, like whatever we do to start at the inception, right? It's not just about the product that you sell to your customer and what the impact is. How about also looking at carbon footprint and calculating and actually measuring it and posting it out there that, hey, I reduced my carbon emissions or footprint by by X% from this LBS to ALBS to pounds to B pounds, right? But that's about your final product. How about talking about the systems that you use to get there
mhm.
overall? Like, how about also posting how much did you input in your overall supply chain to get to that product? That's the true measure of footprint. Like, if you use 3 times more amount than you really reduced, really was there an improvement? I don't think so. Like, that's missing.
Mhm.
That's that part of looking at the process end to end and understanding posting your footprint and then actually talking about, yes, I did make this reduction.
I recently heard a company tell me that they were close to being zero carbon. Their footprint for their company, zero carbon. I read their annual report, and the annual report stated that they were buying carbon offsets, carbon credits to offset that. But yet they claimed they were,
Zero.
they were close to being that zero waste. But I think now, now that we have this conversation, I'm not sure anybody could place a claim
Yep.
that they're zero, getting close to that zero footprint, or I will be, in 3 years from now, we're on the progress to meet it, because no one's going back and looking at it like what you've talked about today. But yes, but you've got a whole, a chief data officer that's building more virtual systems to pull in more data, and we're 140,000 data sets that we have to, pull in. And now we've got a chief analytics officer who's out there creating those AI models. And then we've got the model maintenance, which is, all of that also needs to be added into the calculation of the footprint. And I think what you're illustrating is no one's even started doing that yet.
Yeah, like we are so behind in even thinking about, okay, posting our carbon footprint for our end product. Like we
Mm-hmm.
are even thinking how much input, like how much we are pulling from the planet to
Mm-hmm.
actually then saying we are giving back something to the planet. I mean, I have to say, I have to give you this analogy. It's about
Mm-hmm.
sustainability. Now, sustainability is a whole, like it's a big umbrella. We're talking about a lot of stuff, but you spoke about Tesla,
Mm-hmm.
and admittingly being a Tesla owner myself.
Okay.
Tesla says that we are sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a, we are green, we're talking about it. But what is sustainable? Sustainable is it's a big term. Like, did we look at 3 tiers of our supply chain and found out that that no human rights were violated? And every single person that contributed to every single material that went into Tesla was actually in the conditions that they should be. And
Mm-hmm.
until we say that, it's not like you cannot call your product sustainable until you have achieved that whole 17 SDGs. Full
Yeah,
umbrella.
and just for a disclaimer, we're not saying anything negative about Tesla. We're just
Oh
using
no.
Tesla as a representative example. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
just as an
Yeah.
example, like if we are claiming that we are
Mm-hmm.
sustainable, we have to talk about the full umbrella of every single aspect that we are looking at before we do that. And similarly to understanding the carbon footprint, like we say that we have done this, but it's actually a subtraction of what we used to what we delivered. That's the real savings.
Mm-hmm. I looked up sometimes they're calling the 4 principles of a circular economy. Sometimes it's the 3 principles, but overall, it's my understanding that a true circular economy is supposed to have zero waste,
Yep.
that we're all considered consumers. There's not a customer and a, supplier. We're all consumers. What's interesting is they say that and I say they, I'm, reading the internet, the industrial cycle has to be sustainable, that the energy that powers it needs to be entirely renewable, which is what you've just outlined, and that there are 2 types of industrial ingredients: disposable and durable. And then also looking at the trade-offs in how do you ensure that the process and the products that you have within that supply chain are or are not excluding a partially recyclable material versus a fully recyclable material. So I think what we're illustrating here is that, the reference to what exactly is the definition of zero waste, because it sounds like
Yeah.
what it was 3 years ago is not exactly how it should be defined today. And it sounds like what you're saying is in a couple of years from now, we may need to step back and redefine it all over again.
Yes, absolutely. Think about what we are using also before like just talking about whatever our
Mm-hmm.
uh, pull is on the planet. So again, like huge, as like I've said this like 3, 4 times now on in our conversation, like huge um, supporter of what AI can do and how powerful it can get in every single aspect of supply chain, from procurement to
Mm-hmm.
data time to forecasting, like and reducing waste and identifying how we can bring waste back. But then how much am I asking for our planet before I can start using these systems? I think we should, while we are doing all of this, we should also talk about our inputs.
Hmm. So, as an individual, just a normal person who, goes to work and comes home, what are some of the things that if I want to make a visible impact in just being a normal citizen of the earth, is there something that you can recommend that maybe I can start doing tomorrow, even if it's just a little step?
Do this like I I'll tell you about things that I
Hmm.
do as a normal person at
Yeah.
home. I also want to talk about our roles, our
Okay.
day-to-day roles that we have in supply chain. But okay, coming back to me simple things like, reusing, not using kitchen towels and reusing cloths at home is something.
Say that again one more time.
Not using kitchen towels, right? And reusing my used um, clothes
Oh,
to for cleaning, for regular
oh
cleaning,
yes. Okay.
right? Like this, that is something as simple as that. In terms of, I'm trying to like, it's very basic. I am
Hmm.
trying to avoid. I'm trying to reuse, right?
Hmm.
And making sure that I am not, creating waste. Something as, like, for example, my printer, right? If you use an HP printer, HP does a great job where, they will actually, if you have they have a certain technology built in where they actually will find out when your cartridge is going down, and they will be able to send it to you when it's go and take back the used cartridge. Like, many of us are like, okay, who's going to take the pain of taking the cartridge and actually making sure that we are disposing it off responsibly?
Hmm.
If companies are being able to taking that initiative to get that from you and bring them back in their supply chains, while your customer, like, your experience also doesn't get impacted, I think that's great. So now that also gives me a way of responsibly using my
Hmm.
cartridge and not just throwing it off. And so being mindful of your waste in California in itself does a great job, and actually
Yes.
doing, differentiate your waste and make sure you trash accordingly. So those are the basic lessons that I do. And again, I spoke about this HP thing. There are other
Hmm.
things to look at, but these are certain things that, when I, and again, inventory, like, look around yourself, every single thing is inventory. So
Mm.
be more conscious, like conscious buying, like see if you need it. And if you don't, then do you really think, yeah.
So perhaps I should be encouraging my girls to read a book online versus the 50 books that are currently on their bookcase.
Hey, I love reading paperbacks. So I
Yeah,
am,
we do
I don't know
too.
if I can say that, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
The,
if you can,
yeah.
you should,
Yeah.
but responsible buying mostly, in terms of, like, if you have it and if you can repair it, have
Hmm.
that mindset. If we cultivate that mindset here, it goes a long way.
Yeah. So, Len, before we jump into responsibilities, I want to go back to the comment that you just made around mindset, because a lot of times when something is recycled or it's reused, the product is called refurbished. And there is over the past, just this, and I'm going to use the word mindset, that refurbished is not the same as, OEM, original equipment, or brand new. And
True.
oof, I don't want to get refurbished. Yes, I'm going to save money, but I don't know if it's going to have the same life plan, the the life of the product. I don't know if it's going to be the same. I don't know if it's going to have the same quality. You talk about changing your mindset. I mean, I think that's a huge thing to overcome.
It's a shift. It's a big shift. Um, yeah, but it has to start from the consumer's side too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm saying that because I like the whole repair culture is also weak here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've seen it. Like, we don't have a lot of repair opportunities that kind of will help you as a consumer go repair it, and you can still use it instead of just trashing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why refurbished isn't considered like new. And yeah, I mean, it's a mindset shift. But the thing is, if we don't take that one step to push ourselves, maybe you are not ready to invest X dollars in a refurbished television, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because it's expensive, but take a step in smaller, much lesser, or inexpensive items, and use refurbished goods, and see for yourself if it works or not. But more than that, like, if something is broken and you are able to repair it, I would always say go ahead and repair it instead of throwing it
Mm-hmm.
away. And that culture change has to happen, and the shift has to happen to, um, from a consumer side, to do a little bit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, industries are the biggest propagator of footprint. And so from a consumer side also, we could build different kind of industries. Like, repair industry could be a totally different need once consumer starts asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you could train the market as well.
So I did stop you, but I think the next thing you wanted to touch on was roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, just really quick, but wanted to talk about a little bit like what you can do in your individual roles. Like, for
Hmm.
example, if you're in procurement, we talk a lot about in our annual strategies, how do we reduce cost? And then COVID happened, and then I see industry started focusing on risks, right? Risk wasn't reducing risk was used to be one of the goals for procurement, but I didn't see a lot of real time solutions for those until like COVID happened. And then we are now also making sure how we are looking at our sole source or single source, or what are the other risk management strategies. But
Hmm.
then in procurement, if we add a third goal of looking at secondary inputs also as part of our strategy, I
Hmm.
think, boom, that's there goes your um, uh, of moving from a linear economy to a circular economy, to a circular supply chain. Because now you're looking at waste from other industries, like secondary used materials, and bring them in supply chain, and do your bit as a procurement
Hmm.
professional.
Can you
So,
give me an example?
oh yeah, like as I was talking to you about the say the textile manufacturer that I'm talking to you about.
Hmm.
If I am there and if I am making some purses and if I could make it from some of the fruit waste, like how about looking at those designs and bringing in, looking at waste from, say a food manufacturer or whoever,
Hmm.
and then finding that as a secondary input in my supply chain and then working with it. Similar to that, like for example, even in electronics industries, like if we can reuse or look at um, um, say any like even the carbon fibers that we are using in the building of laptops or anything,
Hmm.
and we look at those outputs from your own supply chains or
Hmm.
from somebody else's supply chains and bring it to back and look at the secondary inputs, like you use materials instead of virgin inputs from the planet.
So
Now,
taking the waste from another process
process and
and then trying to either reapply it or add it into a new process.
a new process.
Got it.
Yeah. Like
Okay.
similar to what we do with scrap. Like many industries, I don't know if every industry looks at your scrap. Scrap is something that's a waste from your production process, right?
Hmm.
So look at your scrap daily and see if you can actually build a different production line that actually tears down your
Hmm.
defect products that came out of your production line, and see if you can save some of the not shelf life critical items and put it back on your
Hmm.
shelf. There you are saving some of your inventory buy. Plus, if it's good, why wouldn't you go back and you put it on your inventory shelves and reuse it in your process? Like look at your like basic small things like
Hmm.
that actually helps you go from a linear model where you're generating waste to a circular model where you're actually monetizing on your waste.
Okay. I have an example. So I'm going to just throw it out there and you tell me if that's sort of what you're talking about.
Yep.
Coach, before they became Tapestry, they they use leather to make their purses, and over time they found that once the purses were made, because they had to buy X amount of leather, they had a lot of leather scraps. And for the longest time, they were tossing them out. Nothing was being done to them. And then somebody at some point came up with this brilliant idea. Let's take the scraps and let's use the scraps as a patchwork and just make some whatever we can. Let's just make some more purses. Let's make some more wallets out of it. And what's interesting is it wasn't really a very popular item. They didn't make a lot, they were limited, so they were able to sell them. But over time, as the economy and the consumer became more aware of recycled and reusable and not necessarily the word circular, these items sell out more quickly than the regular lines of their purses and handbags and gloves.
See, like this is a great example,
Mhm.
right? Instead of trashing and throwing it away, you literally bought your own scrap back to your
Yes.
production. Like this is
Yeah.
great. This
Yeah.
is amazing.
Okay. All
And
right.
great to learn that a bleeding brand is actually
Mhm.
doing this. This is amazing, and
I,
these are
I used to be a consultant there, and I only discovered this because I happened to be walking through the offices,
uh,
and this woman had like all these different colors of scraps, like hanging from her walls. And, the curious person I am, and it's okay if I talk to strangers. I walk in her door and I'm like, what is going on with your office? And she happened to be at that point in time one of the women who had to figure out how to take the scraps and
And
figure out how much scraps they have and what products they can remake from them.
it was
And this was back in 2015, 2016.
amazing. This is great. This is great. Like this is what we're talking
Okay.
about. And also like you brought back waste in your supply chain. And also
Mhm.
like if you are able to repair and refurbish, you're also extending the life of your product. So that's also one of the
Okay.
goal of a circular supply chain. But amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for
Okay,
that.
that makes me feel
I
good
learned something
because
new.
yeah. So, but but ultimately, as we talk about responsibilities, I think what we're also hearing is whatever your responsibility was in today's society, and I'm going to say today's society, meaning before we started having more accessible AI technologies. I think the roles and responsibilities that were outlined are pretty clear and straightforward. But I think what we're highlighting today is whatever you thought your roles and responsibilities are, they have now exponentially increased because AI technologies have become so much more accessible. And if you haven't started looking at your role or the view of the world that you own, and you're not thinking about the technology that's in play earlier in that supply chain or behind the supply chain that you weren't aware of, then I think what we're saying here is there's a whole other area or a whole nother layer of this circle that we haven't really given a lot of thought to.
Yes, absolutely. Like you summarized this so well. Like
Well, you said it, I just summarized it. So
yeah, you summarize this pretty it's so much more better than I would have been able to. But it's our responsibility, and while we are heading in, going
Mhm.
navigating this journey, let's not make it again, as I said, like counterintuitive. We
Yeah.
are now more aware of sustainability initiatives, what circular supply chains are, economies are. We are
Mhm.
talking about it, the impact we are having on the environment. Consumers are more aware today. Um,
Mhm.
let's use this time and look at our end-to-end system process before claiming that we are
Yeah.
zero waste.
Sneha, this was a fantastic discussion today, and I definitely believe that anybody listening to this is going to walk away with a whole lot of things that they're either asking themselves or that they will take away to their jobs tomorrow and start asking new questions.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. This was
Mhm.
like great. Like I learned something by the examples that you're sharing. Amazing that I'm talking and you're already being able to search articles and give me examples. This is great. Like a learning for me when I start my podcast, if I do. But thank you for so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed this
Well, thank
conversation.
you. I appreciate it.